impact from accepting 580 acres. There's no financial impact to them. They don't pay taxes. They don't really do any management on properties they own unless they're using it for something.
And so if we do the by right, why would they donate land to UF?
They would donate land to UF because it has to. They're viewing it, I think, as an attractant for the neighborhood. I think was the argument, right?
Sure, but that's great.
Well, there's tax reasons, they can write off a considerable amount on their taxes, but I've said, you're right, it's a draw. It's what else are you gonna have?
It separates them.
To have that many
from-
people move out there, you gotta have something else that, from particularly recreational standpoint, that draw people out
You
there.
will go back to, they'll go back to their, graduates, their alumni base and get money for developing it. That's not a problem.
Mark, have you started recording, just by the way?
Just now,
Okay.
6:20.
Okay, perfect.
Well, wouldn't UF also get on the team in a sense? And I'm not sure what that might mean or how much influence they might have, but, or maybe not. I don't know. Is that a factor?
You mean,
In terms of advocacy for the project,
oh, and I mean, well, they may be used for branding too. It's definitely
Yeah.
been done with some neighborhoods.
right? But they may be more active. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't be.
Well, they've been moot up until the board meeting.
Yeah.
They've purposely avoided any discussion. Charlie Lane had not been, but then he gave a presentation to board and promoted the golf course, and it got blasted by, the audience. They did specifically state that they have volunteered, and nobody asked them, they have no money dedicated towards construction of the
Oh,
golf course.
okay.
Until it ever happens, they're not budgeting for it. So,
Okay.
and it could be, who knows, years. I mean, as much money as they have, they could budget for it pretty quickly. They did actually say that they would.
I think there's money available for it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They did surprisingly state that they would not, believe it or not, close their existing golf course or
Yeah.
convert it to other land use, which
Right.
is like, really, I mean,
Well,
it's not gonna be.
I would think they would.
Oh,
the
yeah,
value of
it's
that
high,
land.
they need it for their own dorms and buildings. It's
Yeah.
like, there's no place else on campus.
Right.
So, but other than that, they would just sell it for, apartment complexes and.
Yeah.
But I think they would use it for their own, but to state that. Yeah, right now you wouldn't have plans to close, but a year after it opened here, all bets are off.
Yeah.
They could also make a deal, to sell that in the future.
Sure.
To get money, now, and, use that
Yeah.
to develop the one property and then let go of the other when they're done with it. And there's all sorts of ways to negotiate that. This piece down in the lower right-hand corner that's in red. The only one that's in red on this new map that I'm looking at, the southeast,
Development area.
that's it, right? That's the property we're talking about.
That's most of
That's
the golf
the
area.
golf, everything.
That's shaped differently than the one I'm looking at, actually.
Well,
I'm looking at
Yeah.
I'm looking at this one that you just handed out.
I think
That's
Mark
when I drove up.
updated,
Yeah, that's the one
Yeah.
you drew up. That's-
Yeah.
And that's from the original, class.
So how much of this area is, the one that you drew up is the golf course area? Is that pretty?
they call it the donation area, which is intended to say, part of it will be golf course down here, and then up here, who knows what they'll do. Buildings,
Okay.
they're not restricting themselves towards just, I mean, the golf course is not gonna encompass everything, so.
That didn't look like it's very wooded.
This is a pine plantation here that hasn't been logged yet,
Okay.
but yeah, it's, everything else has been logged up here. So, and then this was the solar field, all this area down here on this side.
Well,
So-
have they defined the area that they would give to UF? And is it that rectangle or the otter shape, including
That. All that,
all that, the whole area?
yeah. 580 acres, I think,
Okay.
but if you wanted more, I'm sure they'd
Yeah.
come up with it, but.
We have a core for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in, George.
Thanks
Thank
for.
you, George.
We ended up getting really glad to have
You
you.
have no idea how many times I tried to get into the Zoom and it wouldn't allow.
It wouldn't open yet.
Yeah, it got
We're late.
low, like,
What can I say?
Well, this is the only open seat, but we
Can
can
I-
pull another share.
Yeah, this. Where is that? Oh, is that-
Is the get the UF on this, is it
There you go.
specified that it would be a golf course or not necessarily? In other words, if UF says, well, I'm not gonna build a golf course, do they still give it to them, or we don't know that, or,
that's a good question. No, they've indicated so far they would use it as a golf course.
yeah.
They have
okay,
no other reason for it.
Yeah.
It's really, because,
Right,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's too far away from
I
campus.
think it's all.
Yeah.
And there's another one around.
Okay. Jenny, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I can hear you.
While you're there, I didn't want to if you're welcome, obviously stay as long as you want. Jenny, is the environmental planner for City of Gainesville, position I was in before coming to EPAC. And, David, you expressed interest in an update on 121, the warehouse.
Yes, yes, I did.
And, Jenny, can you kind of give us an overview of where it sits now, as far as you know?
Yes.
What? Go ahead.
As far as I know, it's not gonna go before the plan board for this set or the city commission for this session. They're looking at it for February, but they're not 100% sure it'll go before the board. It is only going to be, kind of deciding what the density of is allowable at this time. Pretty much everything that they've decided for the natural areas has already been allowable by right. They have civiculture rights to a lot of the area. So I don't know that we can argue at this point, because Weyerhaeuser does have litigation against the city for those rights. And that's not really something that we're arguing at this time. But yeah, that's kind of the plan, is just how dense is it allowable use for that area outside of the natural areas. And I think that the plan that for the city's proposed, like saving most of the wetland areas, is kind of what's going forward.
Yeah, the original, the footprint really has not changed in the last,
Yeah.
well, since I was there. It's just a matter of whether it's more mixed, and higher buildings than and mixed use in terms of the residential component.
The problem I have with that development is primarily that, what they're gonna do essentially is they're gonna be able to drain, the area where they wanna build, and that's gonna also drain some of the natural areas as a part of the process. And it's gonna destroy some wetlands indirectly, not directly, in a way that, I think would be, something that people would say, oh yeah, well, you can't do that, because they're not stepping foot in there. But because the land is in a level plane, they can simply just drain the land around it, they're gonna drain the wetlands there.
Well, they have to bring in a mountain of fill. And the material on the site's not suitable for fill material, otherwise they would just dig these huge lakes out there in areas that they're proposing to keep in silviculture.
What's the issue? Shallow clay or?
Yeah, there's a lot of clays up there. One of the issues dates back that Jenny is referring to is that conservation zoning and land use in the city doesn't allow continual silviculture operations. Weyerhaeuser felt otherwise, and that was the contention when I was there. And rather than vacate those areas and let it kind of do a thin last thinning and back out, they wanted to continue to do silviculture. It became an issue more for, there's like over 200 acres of wetland that were planted, that were drained, and they're still wetland, but they planted in pine. And so one of the options that I had suggested to them that and they now are proposing ironically that they didn't want to agree to back that time was to do a last cutting of those pine and allow it to restore on its own, which is already kind of done. But
They've replanted it.
they reset the beds, and planted it. But those, resets are gonna be another 15, 20 years before they're harvested. So now they come in and say, yes, we'll do one last, harvest, but it's like, that's so far down the road.
Yeah.
But, so, with the litigation that's going on, I think Jenny's right. I mean, the city's looking at it to try to resolve this, something that hopefully everybody can walk away from and make the distinction on what's going to be allowable. The density, the three commissioners that were more supportive of a higher density are their tenure just left. And so that was Mayor Poe and Hey Santos and who's the other one, Jenny? It'll come to me in the middle of the night. But anyway, the question is that for the new commissioners, what their stand's going to be, and whether or not a lesser density is going to be something that they prefer. And at the same time, as David, I mean, if Sierra Club is coming in and wants to, at that time, it opens up the door to discuss as to whether or not the site's appropriate for any residential. I don't know at this time whether, it's not clear, and Jenny kind of indicated that, from a legal perspective, I don't know that the city is like going, that's not what we're here for. And they may say, from a standpoint.
Does the county have a position on that?
The county's position is that, that the city, that it was always proposed for residential, even when it was in the county. And then annexed into the city, it was at that time when it was in the county, there was undetermined what the density would be, because it was just, so, it's just in general. So
It's really hard to read.
So I think, that's not to say that if there's a, big outpouring of, protests at the city commission. Well, and the city commission may decide to table it for a future meeting discussion, or, how they want to do it. And so, but, for right now, city staff not got any indication as to where, the protests are going to conclude.
How many acres is it?
1,779.
I
So,
don't know if the smaller ones are gonna be easy to handle. Anybody read that? I just need to wear my glasses.
that's about half of it.
So since we are talking about this, if that was conservation zoning, how can you change from conservation zoning to another zoning just like that? Because we have an
No.
issue right now. in
No,
our
they're not
neighborhood.
changing the conservation zoning.
Oh, okay.
It stays conservation, the land use activities within it. Right now, under conservation zoning does not allow perpetual silviculture.
Silviculture, okay.
But what Weyerhaeuser is that you look at all the other conservation properties within the city limits, that's the only tract that has ongoing silviculture. So that, from that standpoint, they're saying, well, it doesn't apply for us, So it's like either you make that an acceptable land use, is what they prefer, or,
The land is wetland, so you're saying there, right?
the areas that
In the center of it.
There's a lot of wetlands.
there's a lot of wetlands. I mean, it's probably close to half of it's wetland.
So the county should have a policy regarding that part of the land, right?
When they transferred over, annexed it into the city, that's a good question. The city carte blanche accepted in their comprehensive plan all the criteria that was required in the unincorporated area, which included the 75-foot wetland buffers, which was further than the city requirement. So all those aspects that the county would require, the intent was to say, we're applying those same principles, even though it's within the city limits. That was in, gosh, 20 years ago, I think, Jenny. I don't remember the date, but it is in their comprehensive plan. So they did, I think at that time, that the philosophy was just because you're annexing in the city doesn't mean you're bypassing any regulatory process.
So here's the real question, the important question today is that if you take and you develop land that is, contiguous with a piece of property that is considered to be planned and therefore protected, right? Can development be done in such a way that damages the wetland? Because that's the only way they're gonna get around developing that property out there. They're gonna have to drain it. I mean, it's easy to do it, put some huge dishes.
No, they wouldn't be allowed to do that.
Yeah.
They have to do, the DAGE regulations wouldn't allow them.
No,
They
but
would have to just
what they'll
bring
do is
more,
they'll
more
bring in-
fill in.
They'll bring in 10,000 truckloads of dirt.
Yeah, they're gonna have to bring the mountains and
Yeah. Which,
and that's,
which you can buy, you're just,
well, that's the
Buying it
problem is
from
that
west against
anybody
west.
who's been looking at it from a standpoint,
That doesn't destroy the wetlands? If they
they
put
do it
dirt on
outside,
it?
so I mean,
You
the
could-
wetlands are, it's not like if you have a rectangular parcel. That the wetlands are the whole thing, so the wetlands are some amorphous blob usually in the middle of it,
Mhm.
and then they have to be set back from it, it sounds like 75 feet, which is. Further than required by the city, but they accepted that when they annexed it. So you have your blob, then you have a 75-foot setback. As soon as you're outside of that, it's fair game, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So you can go and you can build, 5 feet up to put your house on top of. 5
Do
feet
you
down.
potentially increase
Yeah.
drainage to the wetlands or not necessarily? A complicated question.
Yeah, I mean, it's not extreme.
I think that's on what your dad told me, by the way, that what will probably happen is they will, put in some very large drainage, it will end up draining out.
Well, they will have to build stormwater ponds, there's
Yeah.
no doubt about that. And. I mean,
right now, this is
the
the
potential
problem.
impacts of those things are highly variable.
The wetlands are in green, dark green. The yellow is the upland areas.
But that is the piece, that sort of
That's the piece.
L-shaped piece,
Yeah, this whole thing on both sides of one
Yeah,
twenty-one.
it's
Okay.
huge.
So,
and it crosses 441 or not?
I don't
No.
think so.
this is 121.
Yeah, but that, yeah.
No,
it doesn't
it doesn't
cross.
cross. No,
Okay.
that's a good point. No, it
That's
is.
existing residential.
So,
Yeah.
it has. I look at the.
That's not up to date, by the
county
way.
medium high density.
That's not
this
showing
is-
the huge new park on 43rd. Three Rivers Preserve. Isn't shown there.
No. But that's. Now, see, that's the county zoning, so Three Creeks Preserve is part in the city and in the county.
Yeah,
But
So, and those colors there, the green is the wetlands, what is the brown and the yellow?
the brown is, oh, let me pull that, I think it was medium residential.
medium.
My eyes are
density.
not.
Yeah, it looks like it's medium density residential.
So that's their plan in effect, that,
Yes, and then the light green, this is where they were gonna have a town center and residential. So if you look at the aerial.
Yeah.
It's all dark right now, but
All
this is
those light spots that don't look like the rest of the pine trees are the wetlands.
here, I'll pull it.
So, yeah, if you start looking. Wetland, wetland,
uh-huh.
wetland, 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 wetland,
Here,
because the pine trees don't grow well in.
To the far right out there, are those prairies, the light?
that's all well.
Oh, goodness.
so- There's all pine plant, this has all been logged last couple of years.
Yeah,
And this would be where the town center would be. And then all the outer areas, what they call the outer areas, it'd be here and on this side, it'd be the dominant residential areas. Right along 121.
there's really no way,
Everything else would be where they want to do perpetual silviculture.
but there's not really. I mean, this property would have wetland impacts.
Right now, I mean, the way they've done it, there would be de minimis crossings, but.
Really?
Of course, yeah, we reviewed it and it was like, they stayed out of the wetlands. I mean, but they concentrated, development in a few areas, so,
Was there investigation to see if they were telling the truth?
well, yeah,
For
I
sure,
mean,
yeah.
that was what,
The county looks at that.
well,
Did they do a formal wetland determination or no?
Yes and no, I mean, Arctic War, but where it got, into a dogfight where with me is I said, oh, the perpetual silviculture in the wetlands, we're gonna classify that as a permanent wetland impact. You thought I'd kick their dog. And they tried to get me fired, I was in the press, I was like, look, just because it was pillaged before, don't even allow you to go back in there and pillage again. So that was the really issue there. It's like, okay. Because a lot of this wetland area here, let's just pull this lat off, is actually pine plantation along the edge, the perimeter, all edge. It was all, ditched and drained years ago. And so it's enough to where they could bed it and then put in the pines. Well, now they harvest the pines and wanted to rebed it. And I said, well, no, that would be another impact because the area is already recovered. And so, and it's only 200 acres. I mean, for those who don't know, Weyerhaeuser is the biggest private landowner in the world. I mean, well, yeah,
Wow.
Wow.
and so they've got, they generate, if you Wikipedia, $40 billion of revenue a year. So, I mean, when you think about it, a couple hundred acres of wetlands, it was not obviously the money that they're probably, the pines on those wetlands are like this big around.
Yeah, they
and they're
don't
20
grow
years
at all.
old, they're spindly, they're not. It was the principle of the thing, that nobody wanted to, to actually tell them that you can do that again. So, but that where, we as staff said, look, the big issue of retaining silviculture within the upland areas, perpetual, personally,
The
I
thing
would
is,
just
how do they
assume
even-
do that than have it try to,
If
you
they
know.
develop it though, how would you maintain silviculture? You can't run silviculture in the
That's a good
neighborhood.
they would have to come in on the backside.
Is this-
All the silver perpetual was on the backside of development. It was all separated out.
Well, that civil it can't be worth that much
Yeah,
that they would
exactly.
fight about that. Why
That
would,
was again,
it was just the principle?
thing. It's the principle.
So the city would require them to let the wetland return to whatever.
They're already wet. I mean, it's just a matter of just logging the pines out and let the hardwoods that are already in there
So it's
regenerate.
not,
Now they've agreed to that.
no cypress stones or anything in there.
Pardon?
And no cypress stones or anything in there.
Most of Cypress.
Sure, it's
is
cut down
actually-
historically.
Most of it was logged. So,
Yeah, okay.
This area's been logged over multiple times
Right.
in my lifetime. So
So,
I grew up on it.
we kind of like, I mean, Scott grew up there. So I mean,
Whereabouts, you don't mind?
North of here, like a mile.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really it comes down to what in these pocket areas, what size buildings are gonna, for the, multi-story, more people, with higher density. Or go with the, 2-story type complex.
Have they gotten that detailed in their plan? Is that still not?
No, because they have to get the zoning approval,
I
so
see.
they actually make
Yeah.
that decision whether they're gonna propose it.
Okay.
But then you gotta find somebody, they're not in the development business,
Yeah.
they've done a few, but they wanna be able to make this a sellable project. So
it's
the
an area-
developers come in and buy
Another
it.
one is you get the permits
Right,
and then you put it on the
So
market.
so if they
for-
get the zoning,
$25
get the
million.
appraised value up to where they can sell it to them, but right now, there's no indication anybody's interested in.
It's like concrete 2.0.
This is kind of weird though, because this perpetual silviculture in the wetland areas, if they were to sell all this off, they wouldn't be doing that anyway. And no one in a townhome is gonna be happy about
living
trucks
next to a
coming in
quick-
and
Yeah.
them logging.
Well,
it
that
up.
was where statutorily, when a piece of property goes from a silviculture operation, active ag to residential, the review process totally changes. You don't even have the same agency. You're going from FDAX and for forestry to the water management district. And so that was basically, we had the documents, statutory requirements saying, look, you can't go back in there and redo that because then we're just allowing you to do wetland impacts in a residential development.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we want to keep that part because there's still silviculture and we want to continue to do that. It's like, you want your cake and eat it too. You're either residential or you're not. So it's like, that's all part of the plan in terms of preservation. So right now, the plan is, they'll keep all the same zoning and land use. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jenny, but I think everything stays the same. But it's a matter of that's zoning. Oh, that's right. It went back. Correct me if I'm wrong. It went back to conservation because their PD lapsed. So, now it's basically a zero tax base. But what their land use, I think, on the countywide, it was, it's still listed, it's ag. It went back to ag, not conservation. So it basically is taxed at nothing. So once they go back to, but I think the future land use has, still the old. What was there? It's actually the PUD, the planned development area, low density residential, and then there's the conservation.
Are there any strategic ecosystems in that area?
All the wetlands and their buffers are qualified as certificate. And they have to preserve that, and that equated to about 50%, which is the most you could require. So that dates back to when the property was in the county, and once it transferred over to the city, they kept the same criteria.
And the difference between residential low density and planned use, like, is planned use just a blanket term for like, it's gonna be something? but we
Mixed
don't know what it
use.
is?
Yeah,
It can be higher density.
it can be higher density, there's commercial proposed in there, office. I think their plan is now, maybe Jenny can, they went from more of a town concept to more office concept, I think. I don't know why, but it seems like a real shot in the dark out there, but who was gonna have an office, but that's kind of what they're looking at. Right now, only about the lower 2/3 are like, all this up here is like development in 30 years out. There's not a priority for the northern.
So what is the yellow again on this?
It's
The yellow is the,
single family residential,
Oh, okay, and so the brown is.
residential low density, 0 to 10.
Oh,
units per
okay.
acre.
So the yellow is the most
Zero.
desirable land for development, probably, or?
no,
it's
the planned use is probably
you have
the
big,
highest value.
0 to 8 units
Okay.
per acre.
Yeah.
0 to 15, and then the PUD can be,
I got it,
I'm sorry.
okay.
Yeah,
so
residential low density can still have townhomes.
And so could you explain how can you switch between the different land use designations? Like how can you switch at will from conservation to something else? How does that work? They could say, okay, it's not conservation anymore, it's something else now.
no, it'll stay conservation. It just, Jenny, you were gonna say something?
Oh, I was- We can put in an application. It's unfavorable, and I don't think anything's switched out of conservation. Other thing than some small like swale areas that have been mislabeled conservation. Something the city did in the past was when it didn't have like a land use for something, it would label it conservation. So if it was true conservation, it's very hard to switch out of that, but anyone can put in a application to switch their zoning at any time.
Plus, isn't it legal to do silviculture in a conservation area?
It is legal under Florida statute.
Yeah.
So the way the ag laws are written, it is legal. In the city and county code, it's discouraged. But the Florida state law is much less conservation minded.
She's being kind.
Well, the bottom line though is it wouldn't make sense to do silviculture in the green areas because you'd be backing up two people's houses
Yeah.
you would have sold, what their goal is to sell the entire block. They don't wanna have
No.
350 acres. of
And
stuff.
really, they've gotten all the goodie, I guess you could say, out of those conservation areas, and for, tax purposes, that's the lowest you can get it. And you'll see other areas, including within the city here, you'll see, there's not a lot of conservation areas. This is San Velasco Hammock up here. There's not, most of them are all, the green are actually existing parks.
Yeah.
There's very few that are actually private lands. So, from that perspective, there are a lot of wetlands that are in single family in the yellow. So it's like, there, people are not gonna go to the trouble of changing their zoning because if they got houses on or whatever, at the same time, they can't, just change it just for one portion of, 2-acre parcel. They're not gonna just back out, one portion of conservation. It's more trouble than it's worth. But for purposes of
The large parcel.
for marketing aspects of this, there would be, a big plus, like I said, to have it as conservation, and of course, there are tax benefits as well for anybody buying it. This is part of the. And a side note to this, Weyerhaeuser owns over here as well, all this property, but they sold the water rights to the city of Gainesville, GRU. That's for the Murphy well field. There's an opposite arrangement here, which is owned by the city as part of the Deer Haven GRU facility, where they own the property and they sold the timber rights to Weyerhaeuser. So it kind of flipped based on location. So,
Interesting.
so we had all hoped, and I think would be, is to have all this preferably under public ownership.
What is some, you lost me there. We don't have marketable water rights in Florida. So what does that mean?
GRU pays with their well field system in here, and you can see the wellhead.
Are they just paying to have their wells there? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So, it would be, we had hoped, obviously, and again, the public would, if like, this would expand the buffer of the well field if it was, publicly owned versus having houses on it, but.
Yeah.
As most of y'all are probably aware that, I don't have a map here. Because of GRU's pumping, the potentiometric water level of the aquifer at this area is really low. It's like 40 feet. It's like a cone. And there's been efforts over recent years where instead of using reclaimed water, which goes out to Oakmont, is pumping it back to here to do injection wells to get that aquifer recovered. They would have to put a lot of water there to recover it, but that's one of those issues where in terms of every 10 years, GRU has to get an extension on the water use permit. And they're supposed to have a recovery plan going towards around.
How quickly does it change, and is there an estimate to where it will become a big problem, or?
That's a good question. I mean, the wetlands out there, it's usually feast or famine. It's either, for extended periods, it's really dry, but then you get into the wet cycles, it's really wet. And it's so flat out there, the drainage can't get off quick enough.
There's
Yeah.
this though falls, so this is like completely different than the one we're talking about on the west side of Gainesville. In this area, you dig down and you hit clay,
Yeah,
and there is a probably 50 to 100 foot thick clay layer sitting over the Florida.
the Hawthorne formation.
Yes, and so there is virtually no infiltration from these wetlands vertically. So the reason there's a giant cone of depression is recharge just doesn't happen in
Right.
this area. The only recharge that happens is wherever you have creeks go that happen to hit a sinkhole.
So surface water, there's really not, at least short term, or.
It's
It
there for short
fills
duration.
these like small ephemeral type wetlands, runs off to the local creeks, and there is a creek system just kind of northeast of here, that's Rocky Creek, and it goes all the way up to Santa Fe.
Okay, yeah,
But it's, so there's not a connection really between the surface water and the groundwater here.
yeah, okay.
That I know of. I don't
No,
think
that's
there's any
a good
signals.
analogy.
So,
I mean, that's the case.
yeah,
I've been on that property several times and it's, I've seen it really wet.
It's either really
and
wet,
Really dry, you know.
I mean, what you described goes a lot of eastern Alachua County,
Yes, this is the eastern.
which is surprisingly a higher elevation than Western. Well, Western Alachua
Yeah.
County is like hilly, and it's like, oh, we're in the mountain. You're in the eroded parts of
Yeah.
the clay is eroded,
Yeah.
basically what's happening.
And I mean, you see it, if you were to zoom out with this wetland map at the county level, you just would see there's no wetlands in West.
Oh, yeah.
It
It-
just
Once,
disappeared.
once you get west of I-75,
Yeah, there's
you're
no-
hard pressed to find a well.
Yeah.
So,
But the reason there's so many wetlands here is because all that surface water gets held on top of the Hawthorne
Right.
Formation, and so you have huge amounts of wetland as you move east.
I essentially live on the edge of that.
Okay.
Where, out on the main road, it's like 180 feet elevation,
Yeah.
it's flat, but it's wet, it's soggy. I mean, with a certain amount of rain, but as you go, anyway, it's where it starts tailing off and
Mhm.
eroded and it
Now,
changes pretty quickly.
One more question, that's going to reset then, I mean, this is like, a question from how Gainesville government works. This will reset back then to where it's not looking towards the second reading, or that there's no first reading having been made, right?
Jenny, do you know an answer to that? I don't. Whether the first reading is,
I'm
Are we still
sorry.
sitting in Second reading, or is the whole process reset?
the first reading, back in whenever, November. Was, I don't remember the final decision on that, if there was, it was like only the zoning, the density was the question. What Dave is asking, when it comes back up in February, this second reading, are they just voting on the density that was on the table during the first reading?
I believe so, but I don't know that it's continuing to be pushed back because of the potential changes to the density zoning laws in the city of Gainesville. So with that, potentially there would be no more single family, which would allow slightly more dense areas, but it would still be limited by the stormwater capacities of the area. So I'm not sure that this project would be affected by that, or if they can change it now. But I really don't know, because it is kind of, they keep pushing it to the next meeting and so on.
And let me kind of give you in a related big picture approach of this. Gainesville is hemmed in by the north, east, and south by wetlands and public lands. So development can't really expand in those areas. The west side, it can only go out as far as Newberry is going east. I mean, they keep doing land grabs to
Yeah.
go further. And so the Jonesville area for the county, I'd say 90% of our permit applications are within the Jonesville area. So for the county. And then the Newberry, I mean, they've got huge developments under proposal or that like several thousand people. So in terms of the city, I'm not saying this is justification, is like this pocket on the north side of town is one of the few areas where they can look at it from the standpoint where growth can occur.
Right.
I'm not saying that it's better than anything else, but center almost all this other land on the other side is all publicly owned. And the west side is like, it's either unincorporated, they can't, and you can't, in order to annex any property, you have to be an adjoining piece of, you can't just leapfrog over from the city limits here to something out here. You have to build, you can see where everything it has to touch the existing city limits. So it's not like they can't come out, west of I-75 and do, stuff that basically, whereas it's the same thing with Newberry. I mean, it's a checkerboard. You've got some in parcels still holding, but you have to, by state law, have some form of connection to the boundary of the existing boundary of that municipality in order to annex in. So for Gainesville, unless they're doing, which they obviously do, a lot of redevelopment, particularly with tearing down old apartments and putting in new apartments, they got really I'm saying nowhere else to go, but it's obviously, they're very limited in terms of, options. Meanwhile, the north, city of Alachua keeps annexing in more and more property. They're all the way up to the city limits of Gainesville. So they actually, I think the city limit, actually there's now there's more acreage in the city of Alachua than there is any other municipality, I think. So, but, the more,
The other, yeah, but I mean, if that's their city limits, it includes a ton of. Like park area, doesn't it, or?
the park is a good question. I think the park is outside.
Which-
I think this is the San Francisco's all out, just outside.
okay.
So,
Yeah,
but, the problem is you can particularly Newberry is an example, you can overextend yourself and makes it difficult to provide the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So right now for Newberry, they're doing a proposed, wastewater treatment facility to share with city of Archer and city of High Springs. And there'll be state funding that goes in that as well, because they can't keep promoting septic tanks out here. They
and
need
there's
it.
no major wetlands west of Newbury, right? So they can go in all directions.
No, that's right. It's all,
Watermelon Pond maybe, but that's.
that Watermelon Pond is the
big.
only wetland area out here. But Scott's right. Once you get past
It's already on.
yeah,
There's
there's
just
nothing out there, basically. It's I-75 is even the cutoff,
There's, yeah, I mean,
it's not,
that's why we're seeing projects like this where.
Yeah.
West is the only way to grow out of Gainesville, and so that's where developers are looking. It's also the easiest place to grow, because you don't need to bring in truckloads of fill.
Right.
Because it's all sand, so you have fill, and. So you're eliminating the cost of bringing in dump loads
Yeah.
of sand for every single house.
Yeah.
Developing a house, up in this Weyerhaeuser area will be thousands of dollars more expensive per home. Just because of all the fill you have to bring.
Right.
so these are the strategic ecosystems, there's 47 of them. And these determine the density rate and also the set aside based on, these are just general overlays that were done back in, we call it the KBN report, back in 1887. It was updated 96. It was predominantly based on areas that are they're all privately owned property that have heavy canopy closure and heavy tree coverage. So at that time, so when you look at basically West I-75, you've got what we call the Pine Hill, which we're looking at doing a county funded evaluation of this. I mean that the landowner of that parcel, what's his first name? I think it was John Brown or Jim Brown. Anyway, he passed away in a helicopter accident years ago, and there was no immediate family. So it's been in this trust with a lot of different owners for years, and it's like all the development is actually, if you look at the aerial, everything around it is all, being proposed for, excuse me, that's not the right one. I'm sorry, here's Pine Hill. All this around in Jonesville's all been headed for development. Summer's reviewing one now, right, that includes this bar area here. So we're trying to do similar to the Hickory Hills one that's for Hickory Sink for the one on the Lee property. We're trying to get, permission. Of course, the Lee family's paying for this one down here because they own pretty much all of it. That they're trying to get evaluation of this as well. Hopefully the stars align within, the next year to do an evaluation of that area. So
Was that piece just west of US 41? That's what is that again? That's owned by a single family.
yeah, it's called here, I got it in there.
So it's not a state, not a park or anything.
It's under from Jonesville Properties now, but it's under an extended family that none of them are living in this out here. There's nobody if you look at, I have not been on the site, everybody's told me on it, it's extremely impressive, because if you look at the
Oh,
topography,
there's crazy topography here. This is running. like
it's phenomenal. It's like,
This is by
look at
Meadow.
the contours here.
Well, wait, where is this place?
This is just south of
Going there.
39. So it's just south of 39th, west of the interstate.
Okay,
There's crazy flooding that happens up by 39,
where's 241 and all this?
further west.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
So we'd like to, do an evaluation of that site in
Yeah.
terms of what needs to be set aside as part of the SC requirements. They're currently timbering some of this area here, which has caused some.
So
consternation.
just up here, on-
This is the Meadowbrook,
yeah,
golf
golf
course.
course.
Yeah,
Just
okay,
north of here, where you come over the interstate at 39th and it just plummets off.
Yeah.
Dealing with some of the same
Yeah, it's
topography,
like-
right, yeah, and that's where it just
yeah.
drops
okay,
off about 40 feet or 50 feet there.
Okay,
We just approved development of this site. Or according to conservation easement that protects 29 acres down here. That'll go to the board later this month. And then we just reapproved Spring Hills that includes all of this up to, all this will be residential. This area will be preserved. There's 80 acres of beautiful habitat there that looks like San Francisco. That will be preserved. And then they call it the Spring Hills Quad. There's a northeast quad, which is over in here. That will be also residential. And then the one I just pointed out actually is called the Southwest Quad. That we're currently is a residential component here, and the rest of this will be industrial.
And are those private properties?
Private property, actually all owned by one individual or one company.
One company?
What's that?
They are owned by one company? Is that what you said?
Okay, look, while we've got the quorum, okay, because we can't be carried.
Yeah, right. I didn't get carried away there. So as far as the Hickory, I don't know what you'll want to. You've got the aerials there. I don't know if there's certain areas that in terms of, I just came up with general acreages that the estimate on there, so it'd be about 2,500 acres of residential and 1,500 acres of conservation. As you recall, in the last meeting, the issue was what would be deemed an appropriate density for that 2,500 acres, if in fact that's the area that you wanted to, and that's obviously excluding the solar field and the golf course area, or any of the portion that goes to UF. So at 2,500 acres, that would be at
Where specifically are the 2,500 acres in this map there?
So it's like, it's this side right here
Yep.
where the solar farm was, it's this north chunk, there is a chunk right here. And then it's this large chunk here and this chunk.
right.
Okay, that one in the middle, that's already, that's a. flat
That's
rock.
one, this is
Flat
one.
rock,
That's-
yeah,
That's already been approved for that.
yeah.
So this new sketch. Are we kind of looking at it as something we can amend to our motion as like a suggested alternative, or?
Yep, you can,
What do we?
So this is what we essentially motioned last time.
last time,
Create,
to cut out the solar and the
Oh,
golf
okay,
course,
gotcha, gotcha.
and then just see what kind of acreage, because we had, that was my intent of this map, was just to see what baseline acreage you had to work with.
Yeah.
And how do you base your decision on this?
Pardon?
Well, part of our motion was that this
What-
had to meet the current county criteria.
And what are they?
But
Like, what makes the land, I guess, not desirable for conservation?
that's a good question. That we had looked at it from the standpoint, the areas that are pasture and predominantly pasture and pine are areas that would not qualify as strategic ecosystem. Therefore, that's pretty much all the areas that are designated for residential. The areas that's conservation are all in native habitat. It's really the only areas that are native habitat out there. There's a little bit over in the west side. This is important to note that where that western development side is, there are some areas of some habitat that would be, but as you recall, one of the issues was that, if they clustered, they could still preserve other areas that are within those, the smaller areas that would be, desired to be preserved. So I don't know, I couldn't begin to, and David asked a question about the current zoning. The current zoning is agriculture, so they can get 1 unit to 5. So that would be 800 units. In fact, I think that was what they, by right, I think that's what they indicated. That as to what staff has not, because it's such early in the planning phase, no staff has not come out with a recommendation as to what would be an acceptable density. Obviously, clustering would also be something that the staff recommended, but
so the by right, they don't have a choice in cluster.
they do, but
Do they? Because that's where
Well,
you're
if
stuck
it-
on
it's-
acre lots, and you can only put acres together in so many ways.
well, you would want to, because you would still have by right. Typically, I think it even says here, 50%, minimum 50% of the property set aside as open space. So under by right, you would actually have more preservation than what we are suggesting would be what I had, 1,500 acres.
Well, I like that.
So 2,000 acres opposed to 2,000, there would be additional areas to preserve, beyond what under a by right scenario.
By right, it has more conservation areas. Is that what you said?
He said the map as it's shown here.
The map as it's
He
shown
went-
here, you would
so-
have to have 50%.
He did not go into this and say, what is every area we would like to conserve? He said,
That's the highest.
this 920 acres and this 600 acres over here are the prime habitat. So this chunk and this chunk are the prime habitat.
Because right now there is no silviculture and on those and no agriculture.
These are
right?
much more native, I think, is the,
They're most of it. The only other areas that, and that's a good question, Dean, because the only other areas that we excluded from, and they're not in the strategic ecosystem boundary, but would be primarily where part of the golf course designation, some of this down in here. This area, there's some, once you cut the pines out, it would be pretty good habitat.
So what are the numbers on this again? For land that be preserved versus the land that be developed?
so that,
Well,
2,500 for residential, 1,500 for,
but that's,
But I-
that's not developable, just to clarify. That is the area, if it was going to be developed, it is the most desirable area to develop.
but
So
Gotcha.
it's not necessarily like they would still have to meet the other county requirements
Yeah.
potentially. And so they may still have to set aside 50% of the property.
Okay.
So,
it's 50%, that's a good one, because it's like 50% of the designated strategic ecosystem. So the SE areas that are, you see in the crosshatch, total 2,000 acres,
okay,
where the applicant is like saying, we don't believe any of it qualifies as strategic ecosystem, because they didn't want to go down there. They acknowledge that overlay, but they don't want to say any of it is. What we're willing to agree to disagree to agree is that the pine plantation would not qualify as strategic ecosystem. The rest of it should, it definitely does. And so that pine area is
it's
800 acres, 700 acres,
580,
580.
yeah.
So this area, we would say, okay, and that's why we
That
didn't
includes that
include it,
field,
you
yeah.
know, we included. What we actually indicated a base of the areas in green with these, we call salmon colored, would be what we were looking to preserve if with some degree of residential in there. It was kind of a compromise situation, say, okay, this is obviously what we would prefer is all of that, that area green, where did I see it on here? Yeah, all of it. But.
And
you
that's
know,
close to what's shown here.
and that's
That is what's
close,
shown
just,
here. That's actually.
that's what I've shown,
is
yeah,
what's shown here, yeah.
because I'm not looking at it from standpoint, that's the best of the best.
Yeah.
You know, that we can, you know, really hope for. And that would get close, the 1,500 would get probably, you know, it's not 2,000, because again,
Not
the
whole
pine
area.
plantation is not, you know, qualified.
And that whole
But that
western
50
chunk isn't.
Right, the 1,500 is basically what we would say is all the strategic ecosystem, you know. I mean, you could grab a little bit more down here, but at what point, you know, does it matter? I don't know, it's just one of those situations, because they're gonna fight it tooth and nail. I mean, they are lawyering up, so it's like, you know,
Yeah, but
So-
strategic ecosystems were determined a long time ago by the KBN, right? So I mean, it's not like.
it's an
that-
overlay,
Huh?
but that's a good, it's like their assessment. If you will call it that, determined that, yeah, that overlay, they'll acknowledge that they'll say, yeah, that's what it's. The overlay, but they don't believe any of it qualifies as strategic ecosystem habitat, which is like, it's
You know, that's not-
fairly disingenuous. I mean, you can't say that. And with a straight face, but the problem was that and it was a tactical move on their part. If they don't have to acknowledge it, then you don't have to preserve it. It's kind of like,
But even by right, so by right, they'd be limited to 800 homes. Why is that? Why 800?
1 unit per 5 acres.
Okay.
So 4,000 acres at 800.
And so by.
Do they have to be 5-acre parcels? Sorry, I just wanted.
No, they do not have to be
Okay.
5 acres. I think they have to be a minimum, like Flint Rock, 1 acre.
Max, they
Uh,
can't be less than an acre.
they can't be less than an
Yeah,
acre.
okay.
And so
Sorry.
is it, one more time, by right, there would be 50% of the property would be conservation.
So the requirement in the
Yes.
no, not necessarily.
Ye-
The
Yes.
county,
It's not, it does 50, because it's based on, it's not whether a strategic ecosystem
Yeah.
or not.
Mhm.
It's still 50% because of the zoning requirement. And that's why.
but conservation there would include the solar farm. They could still build the solar farm.
The solar park, I think the ruling on that was that would be an acceptable alternative in that.
So I mean, they could still,
And that may be
they
why.
could have 800 homes on 800 acres. They could have a 900-acre solar farm. And they could donate 600 acres to UF, in which case you're at 2,500-ish acres or more.
And the rest of it could be. preserved.
And so it doesn't guarantee more preservation in any way, I don't think.
No,
By
but
right.
think about a good point. This area in Flint Rock is just pasture. And rather than debate whether it's a strategic ecosystem or not, that subdivision required 50% set aside. No matter, whether it's SC habitat or not. So that's why they preserved that.
But it also doesn't cost them anything
No,
because they're just selling 1-acre lots. So the property, you take like the total area of the property, 4,000 acres, you divide it by 5, because you're required to have no more than 1 home per 5 acres, I think is the requirement. And so they can put 800 homes out here. They can do that though on 1-acre lots.
yes.
So they could choose if they wanted to build. They could
All of
They
it.
could sell it all out as 5 acres if they wanted to, and they could literally spread 1 home on every 5 acres across the entire property.
What is the Flint Rock area? I mean, what is the acreage on each of those homes there?
1 acre. And they're just finished the first phase. The houses go for on average 1.3 million.
Are they all right next to each other on their 1 acre? Or
Yeah,
is there-
Yeah, they're, yeah.
They're all-
On the,
Down here.
on the by right scenario, are they obliged to like not use the strategic ecosystem for development, or they can
They
develop
can
that?
develop right through it.
Okay,
They could go.
Oh, no, they still gotta preserve, that's a good question. The conservation resources still have to be preserved. So
But what does that mean?
that means the areas that are, we would determine that the areas that you got on there, the two CMA areas would be the areas that we would consider the priority, the set aside areas.
That's what you would ask for. They don't necessarily agree to that.
Is this?
No, but yeah,
Is
So, I
this
mean-
proposed or what's actually in place now?
that's Flint Rock, that's what's under construction now.
Yeah, right, but is that,
So,
is
so,
that proposed
If they want to,
rock
they
or what
they
they
can do whatever
actually?
they want.
The by right scenario.
so if we give them a by right, they could. they
it's
could,
under,
like,
yeah, a third of it's already done.
Okay, but this is this is the final plan.
That's final plan, they won't be here.
Did they develop this under the 1 house for 5
Well,
acres, so they
well,
avoided is that what they did?
Yes, yes.
So they did that and they just.
But
had
under
approved-
rural ag subdivision, 1 acre is the small size lot,
Right,
and you have to preserve 50%, no matter whether it's strategic ecosystem or not.
but they
So-
did take this total acreage divided by 5, and that's
Yeah.
how many houses there.
Right,
Okay.
right, that's how they did it, and then they just preserved all the rest of
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they donated that to Baxter Conservation Trust,
Okay,
so.
But, okay, so could they, if they wanted to, subdivide all 4,000 acres into 5 acre lots and sell it?
They could,
There you go.
but I think
Worst
the
case scenario
problem,
is that there's fences, every 5 acres is fenced throughout the entire property.
but you'd have to, no, I'll tell you that, you still have to do, the conservation resource have to be protected. We would say that there's 2 CMA areas, those 2.
Not to subdivide them.
Yes, yes, you have to go, and that's how Flint Rock worked. You know, so, yeah, 1 to 5, you would still have to preserve the CMA areas that we determined would be conservation resources.
But
But
not,
whether you choose to concentrate your development on these other areas at, 1 acre or 5 acres or 10 acres, that's up to.
how can you require them to preserve this?
Because the conservation resources require protection as the priority one. Then you go to other non-conservation open space requirements, which is what Flint Rock did. Some of these areas of conservation are what we call non-conservation open space. So they get credit for that as well under rural ag.
So they can't subdivide by 5 acres under state requirements? Because I mean, doesn't the state?
The state, as long as it's
You
in
could cut
compliance,
up into 5 acres with pretty much no exceptions. 5 acres. I'm saying if they wanted to sell it as 5 acre lots,
then
that
each,
doesn't bypass the rules?
they couldn't do it, not as a subdivision. I
No, no,
think
it wouldn't be a subdivision. I'm saying
Oh, but
if they wanted to just cut it up into 5 acre lots,
they could, no,
but
Kevin,
not have it in a
you
subdivision.
could do 1 lot split. You're not allowed to do multiple. So if you have a 100 acre site and you do 1 time lot split, take
Okay.
10 acres off or whatever, you can only do it once.
Okay,
So.
so they would have to go the subdivision route.
They had to go subdivision.
But what power does the county have to actually protect these CMAs?
If they go, they have to go to the board
Yes,
first for the rezoning. And then, the set aside would be, by right, would have to be 50%.
okay,
No matter in that, with conservation of the 50% conservation.
So you said they're
resources
fighting.
covered. Pardon,
They're fighting.
to fight that?
And you said they're fighting that.
Didn't you say they're fighting
lowering-
50%?
all of it.
Because they're doing it because they're not wanting to do by right. That's too low for them. So what they prefer to do is say, we don't recognize any strategic ecosystem, and therefore, they don't have to preserve. You have to start to practice conservation resources, but they're gonna debate on what those are. So, that's why they offered up, what did they offer? On their proposal was like this area right here They offered up
Five-
this,
The 1 for 5, I mean, splitting it all up into 5-acre plots, they've got the right to do that if they want to go ahead and fight and say, we're just gonna go with the 5 right, but we're going to get a judge to rule that, there's no set aside.
They're not, this is moot, isn't it? Because they're not gonna do that.
no, it's not, they've already set aside what the area in yellow here.
They're not
and the
gonna
green
settle
border
for
here.
800
So-
lots, right?
so-
I mean, that's not gonna happen. I don't.
What do
think.
they propose? How
Mark,
many-
when you say they already set aside, you mean
Yeah,
by
they-
their proposal, or it's already protected under
It's by proposal.
a CMA?
Yeah.
Okay, so. okay.
Well, it's
I wouldn't
at
say I
SAS
think that
level,
they were
it's not
going
good
to do that. What I was saying was, I think they could do that to get the levers if they want to get more with it.
Yes, so they're already proposing to set aside.
681. So
800 acres,
681
681,
and
682,
272
900
of the
acres.
scores, yeah.
so.
And we're only extending it to 1,500 acres.
So. Their biggest contention area is this up against Oakmont and Hale. That they want. That's more the upscale homes, the concept, that area that they prefer.
Let's break this down by pros and cons, as opposed to how we're doing it right now, we're just kind of like hitting this and that. Going with this one, map that, you were signing up to lay out for us this month. Where it's 2,500 and 1,500 split, right? And 1,500 is gonna be protected. And that's 600 more than they were gonna protect it. Not only does it do that, it also takes out of the equation the use of the golf course, this one lower right-hand parcel for the golf course, and it also gets rid of the idea of having a solar farm up there.
Yes.
Okay, so, and it protects the land that we really want to be protected, it protects those pieces. And the pieces that says, okay, these are open for development, are ones which we feel aren't, don't have a great need to be protected, correct?
Sure.
So, that to me seems like those are the pluses. What are the minuses of doing it this way?
Well, so to me, it's really arbitrary that pasture and silviculture areas are not supposed to be strategic ecosystems. I mean, we don't really know, if animals or whatever, if they would like to re-inhabit those areas. It's not like they could not be put under conservation again. So that's what I don't like, simply because they are pasture now and silviculture makes them less desirable. And I don't like that you apply that kind of standard to these lands.
But I
That's
mean,
what I
that's,
don't
that's
like.
the rule. So I'm just, their pushback on that, which they will have lots of lawyers on their side, it sounds like, is, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would be very happy to make all 4,000 acres of this a giant park, but it's their property, and so they have a lot of rights as property owners.
They've taken the,
Well, but I guess they don't, because right now it's by right, so they don't really have a lot of.
They do, they could go out here, develop 800 1-acre lots, a 900-acre solar farm, a 600-acre golf course, and there's pretty much nothing the county could do about it. Nothing.
well, the zoning. for
If
the-
they
for the
wanted to
golf
do-
course, would have to go to recreation zoning. I don't know that they would,
Okay.
Not if it goes to UF.
they'd have to still get the zoning for that. I think they couldn't just donate it in UF, but that's a good question. That would be a lawyer.
What's the US, they can do what they want to.
Yeah. I mean, and if they wanted to go further, they could donate these areas that are in CMAs probably to UF, and then the county would have no control over it. I mean,
But are you 100% certain of that, or? do you
no, of course not. There's nothing here that's 100% certain. If they have good enough lawyers and they get the judges they want, they could probably develop all 4,000 acres however they want. So,
We did look at Flint Rock, they wanted initially to donate it to UF Foundation, which is their land, foundation. UF Foundation is not a recognized land management nonprofit. So that's why they went with the Alachua Conservation Trust, because they realized that was not acceptable for county requirements. So that's not to say for the two CMAs that we set here, the fact that ACT now has Flint Rock you know, they've got 2 more areas that they could donate to them rather than have to do perpetual ownership of that until the HOA is up and running. So, but at the same time, there could be a public-private option if people got together, said, you know, that Latchville County, you know, conservation program could do the management of it, and that maybe that's something that we would do with a fee. Nobody's gotten to that point, because we're, you know, that's.
The problem we run into, I think, maybe I'm wrong, is trying to find a solution that is, no one's gonna walk away 100% happy here, I don't think. And so trying to find a solution that gets everyone as close to happy as they can be seems like the best solution here.
If everybody walks away unhappy, then I think you almost got, you've got an acceptable plan.
Can we put this up on the screen? Like that?
I tried to find it and,
Okay.
I sent it out. My email does not,
Okay.
for whatever reason. it's-
But the problem we run into is the harder we push, the more they lawyer up, the more they spend on this, and then the more they feel like they have to recoup. And that is, and that you just make them angry, and when people get angry, they are gonna take more absolutist positions, so.
Let me say that, you know, my goal isn't to prevent people from doing what they want to with their land, okay? My goal is to say that some of that land, you know, really needs to be protected and shouldn't be used in certain ways. And outside of that, I don't really want to register against them. Okay, I agree that there's all sorts of other problems by having 4,000 homes in there versus 800. But the things that concern me most are this, you know, having a golf course in there, and, you know, just having chaotic development, however they want to do it. And, you know, allowing them more development, but limiting that development to certain areas is the most sensible solution. It gives them something to say, yeah, we can go for this, and we're willing to give up these other things. In other words, it's a negotiable plan. It's something, it doesn't violate anything which we think is the right way, you know, to use this whole entire piece of property environmentally. But it does, you know, it does give up certain other things which we may not like to see, but which really don't have a damn thing to do with the environment. Okay, and that's the number of homes and traffic patterns and things like that, okay? And I have some good friends who live there, probably gonna beat the hell out of me for saying that, but that's really the you know, the important point here. Important point is not to say, you know, we want to control how the developer develops, other than within the, you know, the plan that the county has for developing overall, and, you know, to protect the areas, you know, as strongly as we can that need to be protected. And I think that following this kind of a plan accomplishes that.
Yeah, following this plan with our motion, because this plan by itself doesn't say anything about no golf course can go here, but our motion does.
Yeah.
I just want to say, what you just said, I agree with everything about it. I just want to bring up a point so I understand it. Whether number of homes and traffic or environmental issues or not, by the definition of this board, are we not allowed to consider those environmental issues, or that's a subjective decision? You know, I'm asking,
You're not
because I
limited.
brought this
I
up
mean, it's
before. and you
it's
said that-
subjective, yeah, there's certainly a nexus to the environment there.
That's, I mean, that's,
That being said, I mean,
Okay,
there is a benefit to.
so we're not limited.
You're not
this
limited
board
by
is
the
not-
zoning,
Okay,
land use, you can make, you
okay.
know,
Otherwise, I agree with everything. I think what you said was excellent, and I agree with. I think this is a.
and to be honest, the
this is
last
a
meeting,
great step.
you know, I appreciate y'all coming forward, because my mind can't, because of our own limitations at the county, my mind didn't go directly towards excluding the solar field and the golf course. Obviously, y'all don't have those limitations.
so
So, I mean, that made it easy for me in terms of coming up with this, you know, concept.
one thing I think that would be helpful here is, it sounds like it'd be really nice if there was a map that showed the highest value, like 2,000 acres. So the highest value half of the site.
Yes.
And
without using, I mean, that's,
Yes.
Well, I mean, it would
I
be
mean-
like, it'd be going in, I think, and capturing this area down here, he said is like kind of good, and this area, if it was logged out, maybe kind of good. But
You could gradient too, like, you could have these like a dark green. or
Yeah, I don't know.
something, and then-
the reason being, once again, so there are traffic issues and people issues.
Mhm.
Lawyers will get better and better and more people will move here, but it seems like a very good place to end up here would be half of this property, so 2,000 acres getting set aside for and put into like perpetual
if
protection.
I could speak of a side point to that, which is that if we're thinking about traffic and people as environmental issues, which I think we should,
Yes.
the Weyerhaeuser project beats the heck out of this in terms of those, where people would be placed. If you're considering traffic and a given 1,000, 5,000 people, where do you want them? You want them here or you want them at the Weyerhaeuser property? I would say you want them at the Weyerhaeuser property if you're concerned about growth being in areas. I mean, I think the environmental issues are probably more or less equal. I can't speak to that. It's a technical question, but in terms of just look at the map. Look at the proximity to get to the city and the everything that's already there in the city versus this, which the traffic going west. I mean, it's already a nightmare. But anyway.
Realistically,
No, and you're right, and I would have to concur in terms of just the environmental conditions of both sites. The value here, and it's obviously apples and oranges because you've got sand hill versus wetlands but, yeah, this would be more of a priority in terms of we hate to say, it, we got plenty of wetlands.
but you mean the
in the
15,
county.
you mean the
We don't
1,500
have-
acres though?
We don't have this.
Do you mean the 1,500 acres though, or more of it than that?
I think you could ask, and when you're talking about, it's like the salmon areas, we considered a lower quality now, but. What I would do, which it's really gonna be, is include that. That is as good quality as anything else on this side.
Yeah, and it's
But
Montgomery has
that's-
that on that.
I know it, because that's designated for high school and other,
Okay.
public, and so it's like,
Yeah,
that's one of those like. How many acres is it? 105?
105,
I
yeah.
can't read,
So,
yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, if we included that and then some area down here and then or maybe just cut all the way across. It gets you close to the 200. This area down here is actually high quality as well, but that's where they wanted the affordable
Down
housing
there, yeah.
area, so.
Well, there's different kind of environmental issues. This one here is a recharge area. And what is the effect? Have you got a bunch of septic tanks and
Yeah,
the other one, which is probably close, I would assume Weyerhaeuser is close enough to city utilities. It's not. they're not-
They would have to make.
Yeah, so there's no.
And they'll make the connection here.
And certainly traffic would not be a problem, anything like the problem it would present.
it's
over
not
here.
that, that's not true. So I mean, 5,000 additional people creates 5,000 additional people of traffic.
Right.
And so that would happen on the north side, just as it happens on
But
the
you
west.
got US 441 and the city is like bicycling this. I mean, it's just not, it's much closer to the universe. It's closer to Gainesville than this is. And this is already an area which is impacted seriously by traffic.
That being said, Archer Road will increase in size. That is going to happen.
Sure.
So I mean, right now, you're partially right. Right now, 121 out of on north side is 2 lanes,
They have to.
Right, but it's only a mile.
just like they're gonna have to do here.
But it's like
I
a
mean, just
mile
like
to
they're gonna
US
have to do here.
441 and there's no interstate in the way, or, I mean. It seems pretty obvious to me that in terms of those moving of humans, moving of services and everything else, the Weyerhaeuser situation is a much better place to put another 5,000 people than this is personally, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, that's not, I mean,
You can't pick one. I mean, yeah, it's not like they're both gonna
They're
have,
both gonna,
so it's kind of,
Well,
but I was just did it to the contrast to the point.
right, yeah.
Yeah,
well, but to be clear, you're also comparing apples to oranges in size there. The Weyerhaeuser property
It's half
is
the size of it.
less than half the size. It's 40% the size of this.
okay,
So you're talking about putting 5,000 people there is like putting 12,000 here.
okay, well,
So-
but the principle remains the same, I think, I'm sorry.
So I just wanted to know. The areas adjacent to the Lee property, are they privately owned, publicly owned, what,
This is,
what,
this is Hale Plantation.
okay,
This is all Oakmont up here.
That's
So
what?
Oakmont, this is
Okay.
another big neighborhood, and this
uh-huh.
is all Hale Plantation. So
And what about,
this is all farms and stuff like that.
To the
It's-
north here is the next phase and last phase of Tioga.
Otioga, and what about here?
It's a
Is-
bunch of private properties.
It's-
All
it's-
small, small,
The
5-10
McSherry's, you remember they came in and talked to us? The McSherry's,
Yes.
they owned all this down here.
Oh,
About a mile,
because-
mile south of here, southwest of here is, what is it, Archer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
That's
and,
the
and,
other- that's the
and-
other-
I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is Archer Road is 4-laned
Where's
to
Archer Road?
just off this map, just to the right is where the four-lane Archer Road, it's that diagonal
That
road
one.
at the bottom.
That
Yep, and it's, no, it's here.
Oh,
Just in the
that
corner,
Parker
but it's
Road
4-laned
goes down.
until, it's 4-lane just up the road here, at Tower. So it's already 4-laned
that's awesome.
most of the way to this property, and it will be 4-lane to Archer, it's just a matter of time.
Well, I mean, I also think we should try to get 2,000 in conservation.
I mean,
Like what you
it would be
said.
kind of cool.
The other advantage, the big advantage of pushing it in this direction here is because by going to this, we can then say there, every house that's built is required to put in an advanced septic system, okay? Which will deal with, which will at least deal with nitrate.
It doesn't though.
It can be. Well,
It
it
doesn't.
doesn't, then what can we do? We can
It
use
doesn't.
because
No,
the
them
city-
going onto wastewater, they
It should go on
need to
city
go
sewer.
onto city sewer.
Okay. So we would include city sewer
Yes.
as part of the recommendation,
Yeah.
that this
And
development has, to,
That's,
you know.
yeah, that's in our.
But I mean,
So-
a,
So they go that, but that's important to realize, because if they go with, you know, by right, they can then do what they want to, every one of these homes, every one of these 800 homes can have its own septic system, and it doesn't have to be an advanced septic system, or it doesn't have to be connected to a sewer system, it can just be, you know, right there, and that's the other thing.
I mean, so everyone I know has different ideas for what they would like. My perfect scenario for this property would be they develop 1,000 acres of it, they put 3,000 in protection, and they put 2,000 homes on that 1,000 acres. Like, that would be perfect scenario.
Yeah.
It gives them
Okay.
more homes than they're currently getting, it gives them a lot more homes than they're currently getting, it'd be much higher density. Most of the land would be protected, they would get a lot of value out of it. I mean.
But they
I
probably
think
won't
they
buy
want
it.
more than that.
But they won't buy that, right?
That's a,
Well, but
No.
I think,
is that more specific than our previous thing, or is it more specific and more ambitious? I'm just trying to remember.
No, I mean, it's different, it's definitely different, like that would. It sounds like they're trying to do like 18 different things on this property, like you said, some low income housing
Just
down
in
here at the south end.
just in this parcel here,
Okay,
and probably only half of it. That they, you know,
but so also, I mean, I guess I always hear, okay, they have lawyers, and it sounds like that what the county rules are, they don't mean anything. And is this true? I mean, I can't
No,
imagine
no,
you can
no,
just
no.
push the
I don't,
county
when
aside.
I said, they have one lawyer and she's been here forever, and Patrice Boers. We have no way of knowing, the Lees want to sell and go, you know, it's not like they want to spend years in court and everything to try to. So they have probably some degree of reasonable expectations. Our impression is their consultants are wanting to push
Mhm.
higher. So, when I said 4,000 homes, I don't know, that's the numbers that floated around, but we don't know if that may be low. I don't know. There's no indication whether one had.
I mean,
They know-
if this was developed the way Hale was developed, there would be 8,000 homes out here. Cause there was no land set aside pretty much. And I mean,
There was an article in the paper today about the ratio of, but you're right, it's, they're half acre average. But when the Lee family came out and said they want 100 million, then obviously
Yeah, I like. this
that's
idea
what they're
of-
thinking they want to get.
of Saying 50-50, 2,000 and 2,000.
but they're
okay?
not necessarily like. $50,000 to $100,000 lots may be what you would draw in this area. I mean, I guarantee the lots are more than that in Flint Rock.
Flint Rock were, the lowest ones were, I think, 50,000.
Okay,
So,
so,
And that's within recent last several years or so.
yeah.
it's you just started construction 2
And
years
it's
ago,
50, you say, or 60?
50, 60,000
I
dollars,
think
but now they're
cheap to
going
me,
up.
but-
The houses they're putting on them are, yeah,
Yeah.
they started a million.
But I mean, so if they could get 2,000 lots out here, granted they're smaller, so maybe they sell for a little bit less, so. Maybe they get 2,500 lots or something like that, they may get close to 100 million.
They wouldn't get that much. They want that.
No, well,
much.
that's true,
The
yeah,
developer's
yeah.
gonna, they gotta split it multiple
developer needs
ways
to mark
too,
those
that
up
100
more,
million goes to 4 or
I just
5.
want everyone to be aware of the time, okay, I want to make
So,
sure we
yeah,
come
right.
out of this with. the right
So
solution.
I'm like, I guess the question is then, I don't know whether y'all want to go as far as mentioning what the density should be. I mean, that's something that y'all have to make.
We want to limit, we do want to limit, but we're making a recommendation, not that it have that many, but that'd be the maximum that anything that they consider, and the board considers would be that number.
I mean, I can find out this week from growth management what, if they've got a number in their mind of what the maximum that, of course, until they rezone it, you're not gonna know. But if anybody's, I doubt they would actually come out and say.
Yeah, they're gonna have the environment and, you know.
I mean, I'm gonna run this map by them tomorrow and see what they think, as far as, I'm sure it pretty much matches what we've been presenting so far. As to whether or not, I think the bottom line though is, you're right, Scott, is the density. I think it really comes down to, there's gonna be mixed use, there's gonna be some, townhomes, there's gonna be, apartments, and so there's gonna be cases of higher density. Where they go, who knows? It depends on if they, can develop, it's kind of like Hale, they got apartments in there too, so, but, I don't
Well,
know.
what do we want to say, or do we want to
Should we read?
actually have a number? Do we want to have any numbers?
Why don't we already have
Yeah.
it?
we'll do with that.
And I don't know if I got this completely right, Bettina, so, right?
Okay.
So, you can go ahead and read it. If you have it
Oh.
all.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, the exact motion.
From previous,
Yeah,
from
yeah,
last
yeah.
week, okay. So that the county developed maps to show the most developable
It's a tough word. I struggle
areas
with
of
it.
the property. And if the project moves forward, remove the golf course and the solar farm. Reduce developed footprint and increase
Density.
increase density, yeah. Extend water and wastewater services to those new developments, GRU, and donate protected areas for passive recreation.
Develop protected areas for passive recreation.
Develop, yeah.
So in that, there's no number, but a higher density is offered as a,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
So
think
the
that's,
question is, do we want, I remember last meeting specifically, we decided not to say anything about density.
Right.
Motion, do we want to put density on it as one, and second. What do we want to, now that we have this map in hand, okay, and we can certainly say there's at least 500 acres there that we can pull back out of this. So that we've got a 2,000 split if we want to say that.
At least.
And we can, in the motion, ask, Mark to go ahead and give us that new map that would have it split on the 2,000, taking the pieces out of the, the ones that are currently in the 2,500 acres. Pull 500 acres back out of that of the best properties, that we want to preserve.
Mhm.
And then, making a recommendation that no more than half of the property be, and using this as a formula for doing it. And with higher, do we want to say higher density, or do we want to put a limit? That's the question.
I would think you want to be, this is, I assume, early on. And you want to throw out a concept that they will maybe say, oh, we might be able to work with this or not. And this is, we're making a recommendation to the commissioners on this, is all we're doing, correct? So I don't think we should put any number on it. I definitely think we should mention, and that's the whole idea. You give up some of this land here, we're gonna give you higher density, and maybe we reference the the buy per 5 acre number, not as a number, but the concept, so they understand. That the county commission, if they were to go with this, will allow a higher density, but you take some of the land out of what you can develop. And then that gives them something to work with, and they'll be I would assume negotiations over this, and they might be heartened by, they might say, yeah, we can get out of this quicker than we thought. And they'll make a high offer, the county can, it seems to me that we don't stipulate those numbers, we're not qualified to give any numbers on this.
We can always come back, by the way, in the future.
Yeah.
If the county decides, they're considering giving 8,000 or something like that, we can go back and say, we think that's too high number, so.
And so, I mean, I would like to see 3,000 conservation and 1,000.
I don't think that's
development.
probably
I would
realistic.
do that in practice.
What's that? Well, but then, maybe we should go in with that, and then when they say, oh, no, then we could say, okay, 2,000 and 3,000.
Yeah,
The thing is, we're not gonna be doing that negotiation.
right.
So at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, if the most sensitive lands are protected, the way the rest of it gets developed is pretty inconsequential to me, because I see development happening all over Gainesville I don't
Yeah, that's how I
like.
see it.
So, great, there's another townhome complex going up. I really could care less. So,
Does the county have any say over what they decide to donate to UF? Or is that just a separate thing, like,
It's a good question. No, the original. They were gonna donate. Up here was gonna be the golf course. And we were looking at trying to how to make the golf course compatible with preserving habitat.
but there's like.
And what,
sinkholes there too,
we
right?
all, when we came down here and looked at this, we were like going, well, obviously it's pasture, it's rolling hills, it's easy to convert to a golf course. But nobody proposed that until, later out of the blue, they said, oh, UF told us that they want the golf course down here. So like, okay. Well,
Part of our recommendation would be that we just completely, oppose the idea of a golf course being out here because of this is recharge land and that would just be the worst possible use of the
but
land.
if we oppose the golf course, like, and we tell the county commission that, like, is that gonna have any impact in terms of, I mean, does the county commission have any power to, like?
They can make an agreement. That's the whole idea, that we're presenting them with, something that makes sense for a developer, but at the same time protects the environment. And a part of that is that, that they agree not to,
So, okay, that could be part of the agreement.
yeah, as part of the agreement that, we're recommending that they make, that they, in the outside, it's kind of like the shell of the agreement should include this factor. Here's the property that need to be protected. And, giving them a much better take on it than they would themselves just by looking at all.
I mean,
the
what they want at the end of the day, I think, is that they want a development plan for the entire property.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they'll develop the entire property, but they want something that covers the entire property that shows this is where you can do mixed development, this is where you're doing medium density residential, this is approved for, low density, this is approved for a school potentially. They want the development plan approved by the county so that they can then put the property on the market
Yeah.
for $100 million.
And the county can include in their development plan a stipulation that says, and no golf course can be developed on any
I
of
would
these.
assume anything like that could be.
That'd be part of
continued.
negotiation.
Could be
Yeah,
included.
I know.
Yeah,
They would
it's
ultimately,
essentially a contract
Yeah.
for the property.
right, the developer would have, they would have to agree to that, they would,
Yeah.
but anyway.
Okay.
That's
I mean, you
what I'm
might
saying.
notice that-
We're presenting something that makes sense. if
Within
that's
8
agreed to with the contract.
2 golf courses within 8 miles of this thing have closed, what the heck are they
There's
thinking?
literally one right across the fence line.
Is there?
Yeah, that's Hale.
Oh, yeah.
Literally
Yes, don't need more.
right next door.
It's a dying sport, it
But-
is, but
and-
anyway.
There probably would not be a golf course proposed if not for the fact that UF needs one for, tournament play.
Yeah,
Because now they have, this team has to drive like 100 miles away to use a golf course that gives them, right.
anyway.
But one of the things on the solar. There's been no indication that that's a valid, that's just a ruse. That we don't know the degree that the golf courses for real in terms of UF is interested in.
I think
It's
the
donated.
solar farm is.
I don't know that the
No,
solar,
no, I think it's really a good chance for that, because that's what they need for down in Archer, the plant down in Archer.
but they've got other sites that are being, there's one at High
Yeah.
Springs and Watcha, and in fact, I lost my train. Go
Okay, so
ahead.
let's come up with a word, before we just forget this, let's at least have a word for the final motion we can vote on.
1 second, with the golf course. So I guess the key really is we remove the golf course, but we don't want UF there. We need to state that, right? That's the key. We don't want UF to have any property there, correct? UF, University of Florida, is not supposed to have any,
They won't be interested in it if it's
Football.
on the golf course. They have
Yeah,
no, they got plenty.
but
of
I
land
think
there.
we should put
Yeah,
that in.
and then I think all we have to do is
No,
say, the property can't be developed in any way. as a golf
Can,
course.
does this committee have the right to add 30 minutes to our meetings? I mean, is that?
We
did last week.
All right, this, wondering, so,
But,
otherwise we got, what, 5 minutes? Or am I-
Yeah.
I have time sensitivities.
Yes.
yeah,
Much.
Okay, sorry.
but one of the options that, I mean, I'm saying that if you wanted, I mean, there's many options you could propose. If a golf course was, that it could potentially maybe in lieu of nice habitat here, it could be in a pasture up here. But then it's like,
All of this,
Why?
area- all of this
There's
area,
almost divide right before I give
this is
Yeah.
all geologically sensitive.
Yeah.
A golf course
I agree.
should not go.
I mean,
It is the
it's like-
wrong place for
The
a golf.
question is basically, we have a motion that we've already passed. Do we want to add anything to it? Or change it in any way, right?
Yeah, we're gonna change, we want to redraw it slightly, to pull another 500 acres out of that,
Okay.
it's my suggestion.
it'll be 2,000 acres.
But I think
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
we can just ask Mark nicely and he'll probably do that for us.
Well, no, I think that's a good, I think it gives you a bargaining if it goes down. If you start at 1,500, you can't go
Yeah,
up.
'cause that's.
Okay.
I don't know that going
So
3,000
you walk.
Okay.
and cutting down.
So
There's a
So could we-
match going on here, but
we've got
Yeah, I don't
4
think-
minutes here. Could we make a motion then
to have 2,000 acres.
to identify the highest value 2,000 acres on the property?
Yeah, I mean, it would, I would include the 100 acres here. I've already included that.
Okay, we don't need the evaluation right now, we just.
No, but I think I can get to 500.
Yeah.
That
I
was
don't-
basically everything that is native habitat.
Why are we mentioning
Yes.
numbers? We got a map, we say, here's one option to the concept.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
why are we
the-
giving them numbers of any kind?
That's
Yeah.
the point too, yes.
2,000 acres is the 2,000 acres is the 50%.
We're
That's
not at a
reason.
point of talking numbers yet. I mean, we're just not.
They're talking numbers.
I mean, you go to a rug dealer, you know, like, you don't start high, you start low. Why?
Well, that's
I don't
true.
think you say any numbers personally, but I'll vote for it either way, so, anyway.
I agree, but still, we could still get that map redone to include more conservation area and not put any numbers on it.
Again, I
No,
think,
no,
I think
wait,
this is one alternative and the final solution may look nothing like this. But if it uses this concept, I think that's what we want.
Yes.
And whether it's exactly like.
The
this.
acreage figure is only to give them something in their mind when they think about
Okay.
density.
Yeah,
I can appreciate you, but that's that's what they're gonna be looking at, I think. And so the 2,000 on each for development and conservation, they go, well, how many units can I get on that 2,000 acres? Because of what's been happening.
well,
By the way, the
All
filter,
right.
this is just what we're recommending. EPD
Yeah.
itself may say, well, we think that's a bad recommendation, we recommend you say 3,000 acres and we'll let them have 1,000 and.
Well,
They can do all sorts
we're
of-
not going there.
I know, but I say, we can also come up with more defining recommendations at a later point if we want to.
So. A motion. I will propose a motion that. We request that EPD develop a map showing the highest value 2,000 acres
Okay.
on the property.
That's good. And then set that as conservation and then the rest of it can go residential or they're talking, some of it may go commercial or town center, but I don't know.
Well, that part,
That's-
and
that's-
then the rest is what we already have there.
Right.
Yes, and I think the other one stands.
But,
Yeah,
and I agree that almost the bottom line is no golf course, no solar in,
And we already said that kind of in the.
Yeah, that was already in the
So-
previous one, so.
with the new motion, we'll have our existing motion we made last time. We'll have this less environmentally like comprehensive, whatever you wanna say. We'll have this map and then we'll have the new map with the 2,000 most, how did you phrase it?
The highest value,
Two-
2,000 acres.
Yeah,
I don't want to stick with you, but that was a motion that wasn't even seconded. So I don't know where
I'll
that.
second the motion.
Okay. then
no,
we need-
I'm just trying to get clarity about what we'd have if that was.
Right, but that was,
We can fine tune it.
long story short, I'm gonna probably vote for this no matter what, though I oppose that idea, but are we putting that up for a vote or not?
What idea do you oppose?
I don't want to put values on any of this. I think we're giving a broad concept. And here's an example. The more detail we put in this, I think is number one, a waste of time and not our job.
But he's not, we're not giving them any specific, like, we're just giving them an alternative map of like here, if we were to expand out.
I think we got it. They can figure out the values. I mean,
But
Yeah, but we
this
wanna-
only identifies 1,500 acres.
If we wanted them to be able to.
This
see-
only identifies 1,500
okay,
as being the highest value. So
okay.
that's the idea behind having one that gets us to 2,000.
Just so they have it.
And by the way,
Just because that's 50%.
The 1,500 acres protects what needs to be protected, that's 500 acres that gives the county commission, they can play with that. That's a negotiating acres right there.
Or we should go 3 times.
Yeah, okay.
Because you can't justify 3,000.
You can't, yeah, you can't just.
You've got to,
Because
you
you-
got to look just with a fairly detached eye and say, what
Yeah.
land needs to be protected and what land doesn't. Here's the land that needs to, all we're doing is identifying the land that really needs to be protected.
Yeah.
And then we're adding a little bit to that,
we would be in a taking situation if we tried that.
But again, usually you start negotiations starting low, not starting high.
That's the county commission, board of county commissioners, that's their job, doing the negotiation.
I agree. Why are we talking any numbers here? What's the point? Give them here's an example. We think this is a reasonable example, but hey, we don't know. We're not putting any numbers on this. We're not,
Well, you got to give them some acreage so they can visualize.
it's done.
So-
But
There
this
it is.
does have numbers.
This does, and it has 1,500 acres.
Okay, they say, well, this one, but not this one. I mean, if we say 2,000 and we start high, it's like you walk into a rug dealer and say, I'll pay you 10,000 for that rug, and the guy's was gonna take 7. I mean, why, don't put any numbers, don't.
Well, we're basing this on, they want.
They already have numbers.
Well, that's what they threw out, but that doesn't mean we have to, that may not really be, I'm sure they're going high. They're not gonna go in and say
Okay, but it
4,000.
comes down to
we're on 5.
I'm willing to say, from an economic standpoint, or ecological standpoint, I'm willing to let them develop all of the 2,500 acres that are identified here. I have no problem with that, okay? And I don't really find myself, I don't think I should be in a position telling someone what they should do with their property unless it's going to be a harm to the environment.
Okay,
Then I'm gonna get involved.
fully
This
agree.
1,500 I'm involved with, and the 2,000 is a better deal because it gives us a better opportunity to protect. And all we're saying is these are 2,000 acres that need to be protected. And, take it from there.
Okay.
Negotiate with-
Well-
I disagree with that tactic, but I will still vote for the motion for what it's worth.
Okay, but so what, how would you structure the map?
It's fine.
He doesn't want numbers.
It's good.
Yeah, how about you remove the numbers?
Well, no, it's a map, so you can.
It's a
literally-
concept.
Here's the commission is gonna go here, and the other side is gonna go there. They wanna see what they're actually.
In my opinion, you offer this is a possibility. This is the concept.
So
It's not exactly what we're.
I agree with you. The only thing is, I'm actually proposing, the motion is proposing the opposite, that we are actually providing them a slightly more conservative map. That includes 2,000 acres instead of 1,500.
When you say conservative for who?
Environment. Protecting the
There'll
environment.
be
By giving
additional
them-
500 acres.
No,
We're giving
we're
more
taking away
protected
500.
land.
We're putting more in
This
protected.
this will be protected as what.
We're putting in, we're putting
Okay.
more in
The other
protection.
direction.
Yes, yes.
Right, right.
Okay.
I'm
It's fine
negotiating
as
for
long
that.
as we don't say the words 2,000, in my opinion. The map can be changed.
It's to get,
more-
it's to get us
Yeah.
closer to 2,000.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
that's-
Well, how
that's the
about you
motion.
just draw,
I'm
I
sorry,
don't know,
misunderstood.
conservation
Yeah,
area?
yeah.
Could you do that?
We're
Just-
trying to negotiate.
Okay.
Could we draw this, could you
Just say
clear which areas are being
conservation
protected, which won't be then?
It would be a
Yeah,
lot. yeah,
The blue area,
Two colors.
The names are tricky on here. it would be really helpful if it was essentially yellow for development and green for protected.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, that way,
Cool.
and it makes it easy
Or
because
how about green protected and don't say what the others is?
the only, I broke it down because that way if somebody wants to say, well, we want this to be,
If they want to reference.
yeah, reference, they can do it, but
Well, but then they can use north, west, south, east for reference, right?
well, actually, the two options that make it easy because really, other than this could be one, this could be one. And I can make this as part of that, and then we'll preserve that, and then, yeah, so. Yeah.
The South Central development aerial looks exactly like this. Is it not? That
Pretty much,
233
but
acres?
it's not in the strategic mapped overlay. for the
Well,
street.
let's still, if it looks the same, let's
Yeah,
propose that instead.
well, I was gonna include.
Let's do this one, this, and then.
How many acres is this?
This is 233, this is 105,
I'll do that one,
and then a portion
a
of
little
this,
bit, and then,
and that gets us there.
We didn't-
We haven't voted on it yet, but I'm just saying, I want to make sure she has it before we do vote on it.
Yeah, but,
Unless there's a reason not to.
no, I'm just thinking access issue, but that would be a moot point if that,
When the motion passes.
yeah, we could do that. That makes it easy.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, this just
No,
looks very similar.
recommendations, I always-
Yeah, it is, it's very good habitat. They just recently logged it, you know.
But
it's-
we don't put, so
Yeah,
we have a map that says conservation and then
During it.
the other areas, and we don't put the number, like no acreage numbers on the map.
It doesn't, that's our.
We could
it's
have it as a
meaningless.
separate
It's, I think
tabulation.
it's
but
valuable for the county
It-
commission to have something to start.
I agree.
You can just put it on a figure on the area and not have some numbers to, because that's the bottom line is when they start calculating
Yes.
what can be preserved, what can be not, and what density they can get.
Yeah, They need numbers.
You need numbers. And so, but having said that, I can do it to where it's just two, basically. It makes it easy. I mean, in this.
They're not going to agree, the other side's not going to agree, not
Could
to
be-
develop, not to give this to UF and, come up,
Oh, they're.
yeah, golf course, and not
they're
to
gonna go
develop this as
ballistic
a,
anyway, but, you know.
as a solar farm. Unless you give them something.
No, I mean,
Okay, and so.
Oh,
this is
this
the
would be
motion that-
residential, be residential, yes, conservation.
But what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, to request the county develop a new map showing, and I phrased it a little differently, just to avoid that high value is kind of a vague term, because he was interpreting it completely flipped.
yes,
To request the county develop a new map showing the 2,000 acres on the property with the highest environmental value.
Right, there you go.
That was-
That's easy.
Very good.
so we need to,
And then this is
so
added to the.
I
other
withdraw my motion. Isn't that the easiest way to do it?
motion. Yeah.
But I can't make a motion, can I?
Yeah.
As the chair?
Okay. And include the other motion, the points. you
Can
had the other-
she can make a motion as the chair, right?
I don't know. the
I don't
rules.
think so.
Absolutely can, there's no rule against it.
I think Robert says you can't, but I could be
Okay.
wrong.
So we can do what we want.
Yeah, it's okay with me, other than.
The chair deferring the motion to somebody else.
I always did, but. at the same
You want me to make that motion?
then- Then someone else can adopt the motion.
Yeah, you can see my cursors on it. I think.
I would like to make a motion on Keith's behalf. So I would like to make a motion to request the county develop a new map showing the 2,000 acres on the property with the highest environmental value.
What about the other points on that we already have on the old?
The others have already been approved in the other motion and
Okay.
That's water, wastewater.
no golf course.
No golf
solar.
course.
And no solar,
Okay,
And that they increase density.
okay, and I want to increase, I want to add to that then that.
and don't have
Using this-
protected
using
area.
these criteria, we then develop a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. Specifying the map, the use of this map as, as a starting point, and
I think that's too much in the weeds
But,
first.
okay, and but so,
we may not have another time to meet before the next time.
But if-
wait.
Yeah, but they're not gonna-
No, we're not.
They're not gonna listen to us on that deep level of detail, I don't think.
Well, I think we hadn't even scheduled a next meeting with a consultant.
Right, we have a forum this month, we don't know what we're gonna have next month. okay?
But the preference still is if the project moves forward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if the project moves
If
forward.
the project.
And that's already in the other
Yeah.
one. So this is just,
That's why I said, combine these two together and then generate a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners based upon that.
So the motion that we passed last time and these maps that we're having, the one that we have and this one that we're getting developed, if the motion passes, Are those gonna like necessarily be provided to the Board of County Commission, or do we have to include that in a motion that the new maps that we
You'll
request?
include the map with your recommendations.
Okay, so then we don't have to specify that the maps also get included
Will this,
into the county commission, get sent to the county.
No, that's up to you as the writer, as the author of that. All we're gonna do is say, you, now based upon what we've authorized in the motion, you are authorized by that to generate the recommendation.
So I can, yeah, okay.
So you can
he's not-
essentially write a letter and include the new map. You wouldn't
Okay.
include that one, you would
Okay,
just
okay.
include the new one.
Okay.
how and when will this be presented to the county commission?
I can't imagine until March at the earliest.
Oh, really? Okay, so not their next.
We
meeting.
haven't met with consultants, they haven't called. I mean, I expect that they would. for the-
No, I mean, our to get our advice.
Oh, as long as you're in before, the board meets again on it, so.
So they'll get this next meeting of the one they're after probably.
Yeah.
And does anybody present it or just it's in their docs and they can see it?
Done both ways. If Nisha wants me, I can present it to the board, based upon, but I want to present what she's given me, including a recommendation, I'm gonna stick to that, so, so everyone knows.
You could slide down the door and run away,
Yeah,
not get shot.
I have no problem with that, but we've done it before, we just send it to them, just send it back, and give it to Mark and let Mark, present it to them. Just say, here, well, this is what EPAC came up with.
Do you do present them?
Steve would do it.
Stephen? Okay.
He's been presenting on all of
Okay,
this project.
okay.
But I would probably be there anyway at the meeting, so, I would have a chance,
Yeah,
I'd be
David.
asked to speak on it, so. I can-
Yeah,
They were there.
If you have questions, and it'd be great if.
Yeah, I think you should
someone
do that,
could
I'm
speak.
afraid to ask you to talk on something.
you're the vice chair, so are you the vice chair? So you could speak
David, is- yeah.
in that capacity.
Yeah, I'm vice chair, and.
Can we include also a sentence, and I do think everybody feels the same, that in reality, there is no land that's worthless. All land really should be protected. But I don't know, we recognize that they want to develop, and therefore I think that's important. I don't think, I totally disagree, if somebody says, oh, this piece of land is worthless. That goes
I don't-
totally against my brain.
I don't think anybody is gonna say any of that is worthless. I mean, that's not, I think even.
They think it's worth $100 million.
I think where you have to be careful about being overly, I hate to use the word overly protected, because that sounds like, is that it hurts your
Yes,
credibility to be able to, they go, because then it's like, well, that's not even worth discussing.
if we
And
go in with
then
an
we'll just-
absolutist position,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they will,
Go to court right off the bat,
And
you know, we're not-
historically, this
Um,
land had value as agriculture. Alachua County was a serious agricultural county. I mean, it was a leading in the state.
So that's where.
It hardly exists, it doesn't exist. I mean, it was not that long ago.
but the thing is, that's,
But they're not making any agricultural money off it now.
No, not now, but I'm just saying that it's not like this was worthless and it was not wildlands either. It was farmland.
Well, I
And if
guess-
you go past, I'm sorry, excuse me, so if you go past Newbury to Trenton, you'll see real farm. I mean, Gilchrist County is serious farming still.
Yeah,
And when I moved here in the '70s, Alachua County, there was serious farming still going on.
yeah.
It doesn't exist. There's none here. I mean, there's a few, I should take a few truck farms on the cross and stuff, but.
Well, so I guess because David, you said something like that, and maybe I misunderstood you, but you said something like, okay, these 1,500 acres or whatever, they're environmentally sensitive, and the rest I don't care about. You said something like that.
Well, yeah, that's it.
And that I think we shouldn't say as EPAC.
If I said that, what I mean to say basically is that these 1,500 acres, in order to protect them and in order to keep a golf course off of there, in order to keep the solar farm off of there, the other property doesn't need to be protected from development. Okay, it's good for development. I don't think we should have any development, but then again, if we didn't have population growth, we wouldn't need more development. Okay, and I can't go around telling people, stop, what you're doing there. So therefore, they're going to build, and it's their property. It's not mine. It's not for me to tell them what they should do, as long as what they're doing is not harming the environment. Doing anything on those 1,500 acres, that's harming the environment. not doing something on the other 2,500 is not my problem, okay? So that I'm going to say, if you need to develop that land, for some reason you want to develop that land, fine. They're not gonna do a lot of this for 30 years anyway, you know?
If
Do you anticipate a lot of people showing up that would outright oppose the development? I mean, it just feels like that,
Yeah, there will,
that's gonna
There'll
be,
be
that
plenty-
objective
there'll be
is gonna
plenty
be
that are
heard,
opposed
yeah.
For other reasons than environmental.
just going for a minute,
Yeah, just don't build like.
Traffic and all sorts of other reasons.
Right.
what you said.
At the last board meeting, there was a lot of anti-golf. I mean, that
Yeah.
UF got blasted on that.
About they should have the right to do what they want. I agree with that, and there's really no way it applies. But if you think about it, this was agricultural land. When this family owned this property 40 years ago, it was worth dirt, literally dirt. The fact that the city is grown out to them is not something they did. It's a benefit which they kind of just came to them. And good for them. I'm not saying we should do anything, but it's not like the county owes them to become millionaires over this farmland that they've owned in the family for 100 years.
Yeah.
For if it was out in Gilchrist County, it'd still be worth farmland and not much else. And so it's sort of the luck of the draw. It's, I think morally or ethically, there's not really that force of, oh yeah, they should be able to become millionaires over this. So
Yeah.
Well, and
anyway,
maybe to make one comment about,
Okay.
because it hopefully make it in, I like what you were saying, and I started thinking about. The nice thing about the 2,000 and the 2,000 is like, if it's 2,000 of, that could go residential at, 2 units to the acre, that's 4,000 units right there.
Yes.
That's kind of what the number is indicated
And-
they're
and
shooting for.
the thing
So-
is, it also doesn't work out that way because there's roads.
There's roads and
stormwater
utilities and
lines,
stuff.
Like. it
But
ends
you
up
can
being-
also increase the wing apartments and
No,
stuff.
no,
They can
exactly.
be high-
No, I'm
That'll
saying,
make up for that.
Yeah,
So
no,
if,
but-
if the stars align and they agree to the 2 units an acre, which I don't think they're gonna do, then, but at least it gives, that's the important part about having the acreage, is it gives you a starting figure
Yeah.
to work from in terms of the negotiation, I should say.
Yeah, that's why it identifies property that needs to be protected for the Board of County Commissioners to say, we're, here's our line, here's our line in the sand, literally.
Right.
We're not gonna go past that point.
So we have a motion on the floor. I want to respect everybody's time. Should I reiterate it and then we can see if somebody wants to second it?
But add to it that you are also authorized as that, is that on there as well?
No.
Okay.
Here,
Chair is
I
authorized to
Yeah.
generate a
Okay.
recommendation.
withdraw the previous motion. I'll make it again. Third time's a charm. So I would like to make a motion to request the county develop a new map showing the 2,000 acres on the property with the highest environmental value. And authorizing Nisha or David to present that map and the previously approved motion of EPAC to the Board of County Commission.
That sounds good.
that sounds
I
good.
second that.
Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Are there any opposed? So, yeah.
I don't think, you refrained.
She didn't say she was opposed.
No,
I didn't say I was opposed.
I know what your goal is. I understand. I understand. it.
I
I sympathize. I
respect
sympathize.
it.
Like,
I greatly respect
can't
the
see- I can't-
passion you got, Bettina, because you've got to have that side to help bring the gap together, and it's,
Absolutely.
and in anywhere else in Florida, we probably, but the growth rate down here is just so phenomenal, it just.
It's crazy, yeah.
Excellent. By the way, I'd like to thank everyone for showing up tonight.
Yes,
For-
appreciate George
Thank you,
coming in.
George.
I'm only a few minutes away.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
I got a
Before we
question before we
Oh, you
go.
can address.
Mark, I've got a question. If you're, are you guys done with?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some years ago, several times I gave adverse health effects on particulates from combustion engine.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it may be time to look at micro and nanoplastics and the adverse health effects. Consumption of food, there is plenty of research out there now, some that are even quantifying the number of particles in a given quantity of fish. And other, breathing in the lungs, we've got,
It'd be an excellent thing. You'd
so,
Yeah.
it would be an addendum to the combustion engine one that I gave. So I can send a copy, everyone would have the PowerPoint from the past, which I know was 50 slides. It took a long time. But I can at least become familiar with it. I know, you become familiar with it, and then I can just rehash a couple of slides from the past to get everyone up to speed. And then slide into nanoplastic.
Yeah, that's good. Just send it to me and then I'll pass it on
I
to.
don't know how long it'll take, but in terms of gathering the info.
Just convert the it's a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Convert it to a PDF, but that file's gonna be too big for you to send to.
I took your suggestions, so I made one.
You mean I should put it on a flash drive?
Ever.
No, just
It's
when
one of
you-
these memories,
when you-
I mean,
when you
I said, like,
convert
2 minutes after I said it.
You can convert it to
Thank
anything
you.
else, you can convert it to PDF. That lowers the file size.
Oh, PDFs are.
Yeah, yeah, let's roll.
Because I have successfully sent it.
As an email
As
address?
I think. And.
Wow, that's, that,
I'll
50
double
slides, that's a lot of memory.
Yeah,
I
I'll
don't,
double check. And there were dense slides too. There's a lot of data and a lot of text. Okay,
well, thanks, George.
Marcia, email you sent me about that Featherwood lot and the septic thing, does that person want my help or they'll contact me if so, or?
You know, I didn't delve into, she's a staff person, and I don't know if she's like asking because she's interested in buying.
Yeah,
Or, but,
I don't remember exactly how we got, I could look into my